You didn't wander here by accident. You were called, triangulated by a pattern you can't yet name, a pulse older than language, mapped in the fine print of your breath. While the world insists on coincidence, your arrival whispers of coherence. You are standing in a precise intersection of attention and invitation, the moment where what you've been seeking begins to seek you back. Feel that subtle hum beneath thought. That's not imagination, it's recognition. Every fiber of you, from neuron to nucleus, is remembering its native rhythm, the original code before doubt rewrote it. You've been here before, glimpsing the loop striving, almost arriving, then watching the signal blur into static. But tonight the noise parts like fog before a lighthouse beam. The field is listening. There's a law hidden in plain sight once your internal frequency matches your clean intention. The universe bends, not from worship, but from alignment. It's not about commanding the cosmos, it's about removing the contradiction that keeps it from answering. Coherence is not louder wanting, it's finer engineering. A tuning, not a plea. Imagine this: trillions of particles inside you, synchronizing like a flock at dawn. The chaos quiets, the air thickens with presence. In that silence, intention stops being wishful thought and becomes architectural force. Reality begins to reorganize itself around the quality of your attention. And so you stand here between signal and static, the pivot point where choice becomes command. The question is simple, and it waits like breath before speech. Will you continue broadcasting noise? Or will you install coherence and let the field translate your calm into creation? This is the moment of initiation, not someday. Now, you felt the hum in section 1, that quiet voltage that announces coherence. Yet just beyond it, a pattern still loops. The same hallway, the same conversation, the same almost. That repetition is not failure, it's data. The universe keeps replaying scenes you haven't fully decoded. Each déjà vu is a breadcrumb, a reminder that your consciousness is orbiting an unclosed circuit. You call it delay, but delay is just the echo of indecision ricocheting through the field. When you hesitate between belief and doubt, the signal splits, and the fabric of time flickers to accommodate both outcomes at once. Consider the nervous system as an antenna array. Every pulse of worry, every micro-flinch of self-censorship sends a contradictory broadcast. One wave says yes, another whispers maybe, a third hums fear. The result is interference, a standing wave of almost, you know it by sensation momentum that never lands. Conversations that repeat in disguise. Clocks that stretch or congeal depending on whether you trust yourself in that instant. And here's the secret pattern hiding underneath the loop isn't punishment, it's practice. Reality rehearses you until you transmit a clean frequency. Every recurring threshold, the unsent message, the postponed creation, the dream you shelf for later is a checkpoint asking, are you coherent yet? When you answer no, time resets the scene. When you answer yes, the set dissolves and a new one assembles. This is not metaphysics, it's measurement. The observer effect in daily clothes. What you embody while observing determines what you observe next. You can feel it in microseconds. A phrase leaves your mouth and the air rearranges. The person across from you blinks, softens, mirrors your cadence. The feedback loop collapses into clarity for a moment. Coherence wins the vote. But old habits, those gravitational signatures of survival, tug you backward. You begin to explain, to justify, to shrink, and the loop reinstalls. To break it, you don't need more motivation, you need latency awareness. Notice the half second between impulse and defense. That's the hinge of creation. In that pause, the nervous system is recalibrating whether to repeat or to evolve. If you flood that pause with breath instead of reaction, the script changes. The brain interprets safety. The heart rate stabilizes. The field receives a new instruction: continue forward. Scientists might call it phase synchronization. Mystics call it surrender. Both describe the same maneuver, reducing lag between signal and embodiment until they're one motion. Picture two mirrors facing each other. Incoherence makes infinite reflections that stretch into exhaustion. Coherence collapses them into a single luminous frame. That is what happens when intention and identity finally handshake. Time stops lagging because you're no longer arguing with it. You may have noticed how, on days when you're clear, events interlock with impossible precision. Doors open mid-reach, the right name appears mid-thought. On foggier days, friction multiplies. That's not moral verdict, it's physics. Coherence compresses probability, narrowing chaos into sequence. So the next time you sense déjà vu, don't dismiss it as weird coincidence. Treat it as a diagnostic. The field is showing you where coherence hasn't yet settled into tissue. Ask, what frequency am I still rehearsing? Then breathe the answer into form. Because this is the gentle truth, loops are merciful. They let you practice divinity inside the sandbox of time until precision replaces repetition. When the signal steadies, lag collapses, and the future stops waiting for you. This is where mastery begins, not in louder effort, but in shorter lag between knowing and acting, seeing and saying, intending and embodying. That lag is the gap where miracles leak. Close it, and you'll notice how reality stops echoing and starts evolving. From here, another layer waits beneath the loop, the unseen vows that built the static in the first place. The subconscious contracts that taught your signal to dim. To reach coherence, we have to meet those shadows not as enemies, but as engineers of caution. They once protected you, now they limit you. The next movement is an excavation of those hidden agreements, the vows that whisper, "If I shine, I'll be punished." Ready? Let's listen to what your silence has been trying to confess. That silence you just entered, listen carefully. It hums like static before a station clears. The moment you start noticing it, you're already standing at the threshold of interference. Every conflicting emotion, every stray expectation colliding with your declared intention creates a crosswave in the quantum sea of your own biology. This is where most seekers get lost. They mistake noise for destiny. They interpret turbulence as rejection instead of what it is, calibration. The field isn't denying you, it's detuning you, asking for refinement. When your stated aim and your embodied signal overlap out of phase, they cancel each other out. You feel it as resistance, fatigue, confusion. That's not a curse, it's a physics lesson. Think of yourself as an instrument. When one string hums slightly sharp, the entire chord wobbles. You can still play the song, but it won't land in the heart of the listener or the universe. So you keep striking, wondering why effort feels like erosion. Yet when you pause to tune, truly tune, something clicks. The chord resolves. The air thickens with clarity. The audience, visible and unseen, leans closer. The same is true of intention. Words can be flawless while the body broadcasts doubt. Affirmations shouted through clenched teeth are still static. But coherence whispers louder than declarations. The universe doesn't read syllables, it reads signal integrity. And here's the subtle part, the noise isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides in micro-gestures, the nervous laugh after you speak your truth, the tiny slump of posture that contradicts your courage, the apology disguised as politeness. These are wave collisions in human form. Each one fractures your amplitude just enough that reality can't find the coordinates to deliver your request. Scientists might phrase it as destructive interference. Two waves meeting slightly out of phase, their peaks and valleys canceling to silence. Mystics translate it as self-betrayal. Both mean this: your words and your frequency must agree before space can answer. So what do you do when the pattern feels chaotic? When you can't tell which signal is real, you stop amplifying. You listen. Silence is not absence, it's measurement. Every breath becomes a tuner. Every heartbeat a metronome. You start to notice which thoughts tighten the chest and which expand it. Tightness means phase mismatch. Expansion means resonance. This is embodied instrumentation. Notice, too, how interference often spikes right before breakthrough. It's a sign of convergence, two realities negotiating territory. The static grows louder because the old frequency is fighting extinction. When you feel that surge, restlessness, doubt, sudden fatigue, don't retreat. It's just the signal equalizing. The field is preparing to lock in a new phase. Imagine two waves of light crossing the same water. Where they align, brightness doubles. Where they clash, darkness flickers. The dark patches aren't evil, they're the shadow of refinement. Without contrast, coherence would have no feedback. You'd never know when you'd tuned correctly. Here's a practice when interference appears. Name the dissonance out loud. I'm broadcasting two signals. Saying it disarms the contradiction. The nervous system relaxes, and relaxation is the biological doorway to clarity. Your body begins to act as one transmitter again, not a committee of competing frequencies. You may notice after a few cycles of this awareness that events start responding differently. People who used to misunderstand you suddenly hear you the first time. Tasks that once drained you unfold with quiet efficiency. That's the tangible evidence of constructive interference, the peaks of intention and embodiment finally meeting in phase. And still, beneath every interference pattern, there's a deeper architect, the shadow vow. Those unspoken contracts you wrote with fear long ago, promising safety in exchange for smallness. They are the ancient frequencies still humming beneath your present station, shaping how much coherence you'll allow. To move beyond interference into true signal purity, you must face those vows not as villains but as outdated guardians' codes, written in the language of survival. We'll go there next, into the vault where those vows sleep. You'll learn to renegotiate them, to release the invisible hands that keep lowering your volume just as the universe leans in to listen. The static is almost gone. The next tone will be clean. The static fades, and what remains is a hum, steady, low, familiar. It's the voice beneath all voices, the whisper that says, stay small, stay safe, stay invisible. That's the shadow vow, the private contract between your nervous system and survival itself. It was written long before language, maybe in childhood, when truth felt dangerous, maybe in a past version of you who learned that brilliance invites scrutiny. It doesn't matter where, it matters that it's still active, hidden deep in the architecture of your being. This vow continues to broadcast an emergency frequency, quiet but constant, instructing reality to dim its spotlight before it ever reaches you. You've met this vow 1,000 times. It's the invisible hand pulling you back from the microphone, the tightening in the throat right before a revelation, the sudden urge to apologize for your own power. Every time you approach coherence, the vow flickers on, distorting the signal like fog around a beacon. It believes it's protecting you. So first, we honor it. Fear is only intelligence misapplied. At one time, this vow was brilliant engineering. It kept you alive in rooms that could not yet hold your magnitude. It bent your light into safety, taught you camouflage, negotiated survival in a volatile field. But safety is not the same as coherence. What once preserved you now delays your transmission. You can't override the vow by force. You must renegotiate it. Picture it as an ancient contract etched into your cellular memory, written in the ink of adrenaline and silence. The terms are simple. If I expand, I'll lose belonging. If I shine, I'll provoke attack. If I lead, I'll be alone. Every clause drips with empathy for the past, but the past has no legal jurisdiction in the present unless you renew the contract. Here's the key: vows dissolve in daylight. Bring them to the surface without judgment. Speak their clauses aloud as if reading an old script. I once believed that visibility equals danger. I now know that visibility is service. The nervous system listens to voice more than thought. When you breathe through the old sentences instead of fighting them, you rewrite the biology of safety itself. Scientists might call it neural remapping. Mystics might call it forgiveness. Both describe the same alchemy, releasing stored charge from memory until the body no longer confuses expansion with threat. You may notice the breath deepening, the jaw unclenching, the pulse smoothing into rhythm. These are signatures of a field recalibrating around truth. The moment the vow begins to unravel, coherence surges. You feel taller without standing, lighter without leaving. Choices that once triggered paralysis now land with calm precision. The body stops flinching at opportunity. That's how you know the rewrite is complete. The vow has retired. Its post fulfilled. But a curious thing happens in the wake of its silence. Where fear once filled the room, space expands. The ego panics. It mistakes emptiness for danger. Don't fill it too quickly. Let stillness become the new safety. In that silence, your authentic frequency hums unshielded for the first time. And reality responds with new choreography. Allies arrive without announcement. Timing sharpens. Doors align mid-step. Remember, coherence doesn't shout, it hums. The universe bows not to theatrics, but to integrity of vibration. When you no longer apologize for occupying your own amplitude, the field treats you as an equal. It reorganizes around your steadiness because steadiness signals readiness. You have just crossed an invisible threshold. The shadow vow, once ruler of your inner parliament, now serves as an advisor, quiet, wise, but no longer in command. You can thank it for its service and release it to the archives of memory. Now, the system that guarded your survival is available for creation. The energy once spent on defense becomes power for design. And that's where the true physics of surrender begins, not submission, but precision. The next section reveals how biology itself joins this alliance, how the rhythm of heart and breath can become your laboratory for grace. Because coherence is not conquered, it's conducted. That vow dissolved quietly, didn't about it, like frost retreating from sunlight. In its place, there's space, the kind of spaciousness that feels almost eerie at first, as if your body can't quite believe safety could exist without tension. But that stillness isn't absence, it's invitation. What you're feeling now is the biological architecture of surrender beginning to form. Surrender isn't collapse, it's calibration. It's what happens when the heart stops trying to outthink the field and begins to move in phase with it. Imagine a metronome syncing to another, across a table at first chaotic, then suddenly, miraculously aligned. That's what your nervous system does when coherence increases. It stops thrashing and starts entraining. Consider this through both mystic and scientist eyes. The mystic says, breathe slower, and the divine finds you. The scientist observes slow. Coherent breathing reduces cortisol, balances vagal tone, increases heart rate variability, biological coherence. 2 languages, 1 truth. The body is a laboratory where physics and faith meet in rhythm. When surrender begins, you'll notice a shift in internal geometry. The breath expands from the diaphragm instead of the shoulders. The spine lengthens without command. Thought slows to the pace of heartbeat. You've stopped fighting gravity and begun collaborating with it. This is physics at its most merciful potential energy transmuting into flow. Most people misunderstand surrender as loss of control, but control was never mastery, it was compensation. When the heart rhythm syncs with breath, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of planning and prediction, quiets, allowing the intuitive networks to rise. You're not losing agency, you're upgrading its source. It's like switching from manual steering to magnetic guidance. Your will still directs the vehicle, but the road begins to assist your motion. The bumps smooth, the timing of lights feels choreographed. Coincidences increase because your signal is easier to read. That's the field's feedback loop, confirming that alignment is taking hold. There's another layer to this physics, the phenomenon of resonance efficiency. In mechanics, when two oscillators move in harmony, less energy is wasted as heat. In consciousness, it feels like effortlessness. You've experienced it on good days. Words flow, decisions click, outcomes arrange themselves without strain. That's not luck. It's reduced energetic waste. Surrender reclaims what resistance once burned. And notice, surrender doesn't mean passivity. It means precision. The relaxed body is a tuned instrument. The calm mind is a stable observer. Both act as accurate measuring tools, collapsing probability into preferred reality. Scientists might call this observer stability. Mystics call it grace. Grace is not a miracle that visits the worthy. It's a natural consequence of low internal entropy. When your system stops emitting contradictory signals, the universe no longer has to guess which version of you to answer. The conversation becomes clear, elegant, immediate. You may feel this as warmth in the chest, a slight hum in the palms, or time behaving differently, stretching when you're creative, condensing when you rest. That's coherence writing its equations in your tissues. The field is teaching you that peace is not a luxury. It's a stabilizing frequency, a form of high intelligence. And here's the paradox: the moment you surrender control, precision increases. The less you force outcomes, the more accurately the environment mirrors your cleanest signal. You stop micromanaging and start magnetizing. You no longer chase, you orchestrate. So breathe 5 counts in, hold 5 counts out, pause, feel the circuitry settle. You're conducting physics with breath now. Your surrender is not a fall, it's flight at terminal clarity. From here, the field begins to amplify. Every matched vibration multiplies your reach. We're stepping next into the law of constructive interference, the mathematics of grace, where small coherent acts begin to move mountain. You'll see how harmony, not effort, becomes the engine of acceleration. Because the universe doesn't reward control, it rewards coherence. You can feel it already, the way stillness turns to motion without effort. That shift isn't coincidence, it's constructive interference taking shape. 2 waves aligning in perfect phase, your intention and your embodiment, no longer colliding but amplifying. This is the quiet physics of grace. Grace has always been misunderstood. People call it luck, blessing, even divine favoritism. But in truth, it's feedback, the universe confirming resonance. When every layer of you hums in agreement, the field magnifies your output. The peaks of your signal meet the peaks of the world's rhythm, and the result is exponential amplitude. Small gestures echo as large outcomes. Imagine 2 tuning forks side by side. Strike one and the other sings. That's grace in motion, energy, transferring without loss. Momentum shared without strain. It's what happens when the wave of what you ask and the wave of what you are finally merge. The sound grows stronger, clearer, unavoidable. You've felt glimpses of it, the right person appearing mid-thought, the solution arriving just before deadline, the impossible door opening with a whisper instead of a shove. Those are harmonics of coherence, evidence that the field has locked onto your frequency and multiplied it. The mystic bows and calls it miracle. The physicist smiles and calls it resonance efficiency. Here's the rule behind the magic: alignment reduces friction. Friction releases energy. Released energy becomes flow. Grace is not a random visitation, it's liberated potential. But constructive interference doesn't demand perfection, it demands consistency. The field reads patterns, not performances. If your signal wobbles occasionally, it doesn't exile you, it adjusts, seeking rephase. That's why synchronicity often returns in cycles. The field keeps offering the rhythm until you remember the dance. When grace stabilizes, your sense of proportion changes. You realize that magnitude is not measured in effort. A single act performed in coherence has more consequence than 100 gestures made in anxiety. You begin to favor precision over volume, clarity over noise. Here's what that looks like in daily reality. One conversation spoken without defense can dissolve years of misunderstanding. One decision made from calm conviction can redirect the geometry of a decade. That's not exaggeration, it's wave physics. When the amplitude doubles, the power quadruples. Scientists measure it as constructive superposition. Mystics describe it as miracles accelerating. Both mean this: the universe prefers elegance. It rewards the economy of truth. But to live by the law of grace, you must surrender one final illusion that struggle equals virtue. You've been trained to believe that effort proves worth. Yet grace whispers otherwise. Ease is not laziness, it's alignment. When you're tuned, life stops demanding proof and starts offering partnership. So when momentum begins to build, don't sabotage it with disbelief. Many collapse at the threshold of ease because the nervous system has been conditioned to equate peace with danger. Breathe through that reflex. Let the ease become familiar. Train your biology to trust flow. You'll know you've anchored grace when cause and effect start overlapping, when intention and manifestation feel nearly simultaneous. That's the mark of phase lock. The moment the field recognizes your rhythm as stable, time itself becomes pliable. The hours obey coherence more than clocks. This is where miracles hide in plain sight, inside the mathematics of alignment. You stop chasing the wave and learn to ride its crest. You act at the moment of maximum constructive interference, where minimal input yields maximal return. Surfers call it reading the ocean. Mystics call it divine timing. And from this height, another layer reveals itself: the biological counterpart of resonance. The very machinery of your cells listens to coherence. DNA folds and unfolds like a choir of antennas, responding to rhythm. To move deeper, we turn inward again, into the body's quantum cathedral, where physics and devotion meet at the level of code. Grace was only the prelude. Next, we enter the sanctum, where your DNA becomes the transmitter of destiny. You can feel the hum migrating inward now, out of thought, into tissue. Grace has done its work, clearing the surface static. What remains is the deep music of biology itself, your cells singing a forgotten language. Here, coherence is no longer an idea, it's anatomy. Every heartbeat sends a low-voltage broadcast through blood, fascia, and bone, a rhythm that announces your internal state to the surrounding field. Scientists measure this as electromagnetic flux. Mystics feel it as presence. Both are correct. You are not merely in the field. You are a living transmitter inside it. DNA is the antenna. Coiled in every cell are filaments sensitive to vibration, folding and unfolding in response to emotion, chemistry, and meaning. When you think coherently, when breath, thought, and feeling align, these coils open like petals. Information travels freely. But when you contract in fear or self-division, the helix tightens, restricting translation. The code still exists, but the signal cannot pass. Imagine your body as 1,000 temples, each cell a sanctuary with an altar of spiraling light. Every prayer you whisper, not in words, but in emotional frequency, becomes an offering that alters the posture of that spiral. Joy loosens, grief constricts, love conducts. This is not poetry alone, it's epigenetics described in metaphor. Consider this under a microscope. The difference between activated and dormant DNA looks like choreography. Proteins move aside, like curtains drawing open to a stage. That movement is triggered not by command, but by permission, biochemical, emotional, energetic. You do not force activation, you allow it through coherence. This is why ancient mystics spoke of breath as the bridge. Slow, rhythmic breathing alters the chemistry that governs gene expression. Cortisol decreases, oxytocin rises, histones relax. What you feel as calm is the genome breathing with you. Each inhale a signal safe to expand. Each exhale time to integrate. In that harmony, the body becomes an intelligent laboratory of creation. You start noticing the subtle ways it collaborates with reality. The stomach tightens just before a bad decision. The skin tingles moments before synchronicity arrives. The spine aligns before courage speaks. Your biology has learned to prophesy, to preview the field's response before your mind catches up. This is the phase where intuition ceases to be mystical. It becomes mechanical, the measurable dialogue between coherent cells and the fabric of probability. The body is not late to the conversation. It's the first responder. You might ask, what happens when the signal strengthens beyond the skin? The answer is astonishingly simple. The field listens. Your coherence modifies the environment. Studies whisper it in cautious language. Electromagnetic coupling. Heart field entrainment, but lived experience declares it outright. Rooms calm when you breathe evenly. Children settle near your silence. Technology misbehaves less when you're centered. The outer world mirrors the calibration of your inner network. In this sense, coherence is leadership at the atomic level. You don't persuade reality. You model stability until it entrains to you. The nervous systems around you, human and planetary alike, begin to follow your metronome. That's why compassion feels powerful. It's physics disguised as kindness. So treat your DNA like an instrument, not a relic. Feed it rhythm, hydration, honesty. Speak to it through posture and intention. When you stand tall, you tell your cells, we're allowed to take up space. When you rest deeply, you tell them, we trust time. And when you move from devotion instead of fear, you tell the genome, upgrade accepted. Soon, the line between biology and divinity blurs. You realize the temple was never external. It has always been carried in your marrow, broadcasting a signal the universe cannot ignore. And from here, influence begins to extend outward, far beyond the self. Your coherence becomes contagious. Entanglement awakens. The field starts composing symphonies with other hearts tuned to the same note. That's where we're heading next, into the geometry of influence, where resonance turns into leadership and coherence becomes culture. The signal that once pulsed quietly inside you now begins to travel outward. Invisible, undeniable. What started as an internal frequency is expanding its circumference, weaving threads through the collective field. You're no longer a single instrument, you're part of an orchestra whose notes carry across time. This is entanglement becoming influence. Entanglement isn't just a theory from quantum physics, it's a lived reality. Two particles once connected continue to mirror each other across distance. Human beings, too, are particles of consciousness, exchanging information beyond language. Every coherent thought you hold, every breath you steady, every kindness you extend, these send out ripples of measurable harmony that others unconsciously align to. Picture it a city at rush hour, minds racing, pulses fragmented, anxiety buzzing like neon. And then you enter a room calm, grounded, coherent. Nothing dramatic happens, you simply are. Yet slowly, breath by breath, the energy shifts. Voices lower, shoulders soften, laughter finds rhythm again. No one can name why. But the physics is clear. Coherence has begun to organize chaos. That is, influence stripped of performance, not domination, not persuasion, but entrainment. You become the stable node around which turbulence recalibrates. The field responds to stability the way iron filings respond to a magnet, not by worship, but by alignment. Leadership, in its truest form, is coherence multiplied. The ancient mystics called it radiance. Modern science calls it heart field resonance. Whatever the label, the mechanism is identical. Your internal order reduces external entropy. You carry peace like an algorithm that rewrites the local code. And here's what most forget: influence doesn't require scale. It requires clarity. One coherent being in a fragmented network has more systemic impact than 100 scattered voices shouting for control. Your calm becomes infrastructure. People will feel safer around you and call it charisma. They'll feel seen and call it empathy. But what they're sensing is physics, the law of least resistance finding expression through human grace. As this field effect strengthens, synchronicities cluster, allies appear, ideas converge, timing tightens. You begin to magnetize others who are unknowingly seeking the signal you now emit. Not followers, co-resonators. Together you form a lattice of stability, an invisible architecture that holds civilization together during its storms. This is the quiet revolution of coherence, leadership without hierarchy, guidance without noise. Every balanced nervous system becomes a transmitter, every act of presence a node in the network of sanity. But influence also carries responsibility. The field amplifies whatever you hold steadily. Not only the light, hold bitterness, and it multiplies. Hold clarity, and it harmonizes. That's why integrity matters more than intention. The universe doesn't respond to your wish list. It responds to your waveform. So check the purity of your signal often. When resentment spikes, breathe it into stillness. When fatigue whispers cynicism, rest instead of broadcasting distortion. Your coherence is public infrastructure, a frequency of service. You'll notice this influence most in small, human moments. The friend who suddenly confides the truth they've never spoken aloud. The stranger who meets your eyes and exhales as if remembering something ancient. The team that stops competing and starts creating. These are entanglement events, field harmonizations. They prove that your personal coherence has become environmental leadership. And when enough of these nodes synchronize families, classrooms, organizations, cities, the collective frequency rises. The metrics may call it innovation, empathy, or peace. The mystics would simply say the field remembered itself. This is where your work shifts from personal mastery to collective architecture. You no longer hold coherence just for your own life, but as a stabilizing force for others. Influence is not about spotlight. It's about stewardship, holding space until others rediscover their own rhythm. From this level of resonance, pressure will come again, not as punishment, but as test. The next stage of transformation requires compression, the alchemical heat that crystallizes carbon into diamond. Coherence must endure tension to become luminous. And so we enter the crucible, the phase transition, where the atmosphere thickens. The old shape trembles and identity itself rearranges under the gravity of truth. The air grows dense now, not oppressive, but charged, as if the room itself were holding its breath. This is the moment every system faces before transformation, the phase transition. Water quivers at 99 degrees, then with no visible warning becomes vapor. You are that close. Everything in you that once defined safety begins to shimmer. The labels, the reflexes, the familiar doubts, they start losing mass, slipping through your fingers like sand. Don't panic. That tremor you feel isn't collapse, it's reorganization. Coherence under pressure doesn't break, it crystallizes. Think of graphite and diamond. Both are pure carbon. The only difference is structure atoms rearranged under sustained intensity. That's the secret of the universe's evolution. Pressure reveals pattern. You've been living as graphite, functional, durable, invisible in the dark. Now the field wants to refine you into diamond, same material, new geometry. During this phase shift, time behaves strangely. Days may stretch like taffy, nights may blink by in a single breath. Conversations echo with prophetic precision. Faces from the past reappear like test questions rewritten by fate. These distortions are not mistakes. They are the physics of reconfiguration, reality bending to accommodate your new frequency. The mind, desperate for narrative, will call it chaos. Let it chatter. Beneath its panic, a deeper intelligence is at work, DNA rearranging, neurons rewiring, destiny crystallizing. Every exhale is a micro-release of the old signature. Every inhale an invitation for the new architecture to lock into place. Here's the paradox of transformation. The closer you move to coherence, the louder distortion screams. Old identities, threatened by extinction, perform last-minute monologues. They will warn you of exile, of arrogance, of loss. But you are not losing, you are refining. Their noise is proof of your progress. If you listen closely, you'll sense an undercurrent beneath the static, a steady pulse counting down. It's the metronome of your becoming, syncing your biology with the geometry of your next reality. Trust it. This is evolution written in heartbeat. The signs of completion will be subtle. Guilt loses its leverage. Shame stops negotiating. Approval becomes weather, not oxygen. You'll start recognizing freedom not as euphoria, but as precision, the quiet competence of a system that knows its purpose. In this phase, decision-making simplifies. You no longer weigh every option through the lens of fear. Instead, a single question governs your compass. Does this increase or decrease coherence? The body answers before the mind can translate. Tingling means yes. Tightness means no. You stop consulting the committee of ghosts that once delayed every motion. External evidence will follow swiftly. People who once required explanation will intuitively understand. Projects that stalled will accelerate. Even technology will begin to cooperate, files saving smoothly, messages sending at perfect timing. None of this is superstition. The field itself is acknowledging your stabilized pattern. And then, a curious quiet arrives, not emptiness, but saturation. Every sense heightens. The air feels thicker, alive. The mind slows to a dignified stillness. This is the post-transition silence, the first breath in a new atmosphere. The lattice has reformed. The old code is archived. Identity, once costume, becomes instrument. You stop performing and start transmitting. Authority no longer feels like effort, it feels like hum. The self is no longer a mask you wear, it's a conduit through which reality expresses refinement. From this point, you can't return to graphite behavior. The lattice won't permit regression. You can only polish the facets already forming. The test ahead is not survival, it's stewardship. What will you do with the clarity you've earned? That question is the bridge to the final movement. Coherence, under grace and pressure, has given you structure. Now comes purpose, not as ambition, but as overflow. Influence will translate into mission, not from duty, but from devotion. The diamond must refract light. It cannot hoard it. And so, as we step into the final chamber, the air thins, the frequency rises, and the question echoes like thunder made of silk. How will you use your coherence to serve creation itself? The question hangs in the charged air. How will you serve creation itself? The answer doesn't come as a command, but as a current, coherence. Once an inner phenomenon, now demands translation. It wants hands, words, movement. The phase transition is complete. Now comes the embodiment of authority. Authority, the field defines it, is not control, it's conductivity. You have become a circuit through which intelligence moves unimpeded. The signal flows clean because the interference is gone. You don't direct the universe, you articulate it. Every action becomes an echo of cosmic order speaking through human form. Look at your life through this lens: leadership, creativity, relationships, they are all mediums for transmission. Wherever coherence resides, influence organizes itself around it. You don't need credentials or permission. The authority is the clarity itself. Others will feel it before they understand it, drawn by the frequency of steadiness that never demands, only demonstrates. This is what the mystics meant by divine will. Not a hierarchy, but resonance. When your nervous system hums in phase with expansion, the universe recognizes itself in your rhythm. That recognition is obedience not to you, but through you. Reality bends around coherent geometry the way a river bends around a stone. You've seen glimpses already, words landing like architecture, time behaving like an accomplice, coincidence arranging itself as choreography. Now, those phenomena stabilize into normalcy. You no longer chase alignment. You are alignment. The signal that once fluttered is now a constant pulse, a soft roar beneath every breath. But power tests itself through humility. Authority without humility corrodes. The moment you believe coherence makes you superior, the signal fractures. Remember, the universe bows to coherence, not ego. Your task is not to command the world, but to tune it, gently, by example. You'll notice this embodied authority in how your presence edits chaos. Meetings once full of friction soften into focus. Conversations drift naturally toward resolution. The air in a room thickens with calm when you enter, not because you intend it, but because your frequency insists on order. This is the quiet magnetism of mastery. And yet, this state isn't an endpoint. It's a relay. Authority flows outward, multiplying coherence in others. You'll see it in their eyes when they start breathing deeper, when their voices steady, when they rediscover their own rhythm. Influence becomes contagion, and contagion becomes culture. That is how civilizations evolve, one coherent nervous system at a time. Your life's mission, then, isn't something to invent, it's something to remember. It was embedded in your signal from the beginning, encrypted in the geometry of your DNA. Every passion, every trial, every loss was rehearsal for this frequency. You didn't earn it, you became it. Mission feels different from ambition. Ambition strives to prove worth. Mission expresses coherence. One is extraction, the other is overflow. You no longer perform to impress reality. You serve because you can't not. You give not from depletion, but from design. Here's what it looks like in motion: decisions made without debate, timing that feels preordained, creativity that arrives whole instead of partial. The right collaborators appear as if summoned not by luck, but by physics. When your broadcast stabilizes, compatible signals converge. The lattice begins to build itself through you. This is the architecture of service. You become a node of reliability in a fluctuating world. And reliability, steady coherence, is the rarest form of leadership. It doesn't shout, it anchors. It doesn't predict, it perceives. It doesn't dominate, it harmonizes. When doubt returns, and it will, disguised as nostalgia for smaller problems, meet it with kindness. The universe doesn't ask for perfection, only maintenance. Coherence is not a state you achieve once. It's a rhythm you rejoin daily. Every breath is a reboot. Every act of presence, a recalibration. You are now fluent in the physics of grace. The field recognizes your signature. The lattice hums in response. This is what mastery feels like, not invincibility, but intimacy with the fabric of things. So stand in that recognition, spine aligned, heart open, breath steady. Let your pulse become instruction, your stillness a template, your movement a message. The universe is listening through you now. And if you wonder what comes next, remember the diamond doesn't seek light. It simply refracts it. Your life, from this moment forward, is the refraction. The light softens now, the current settling into something quiet and steady. What was once a roar of revelation becomes a hum beneath the ribs, subtle, grounded, infinite. The diamond of coherence no longer flashes, it glows. You can feel it, can't you? The difference between striving and radiating, between reaching for alignment and realizing you are alignment. This is the afterglow of transformation, the calm that follows awakening, the silence that confirms arrival. The universe is no longer a puzzle to decode. It's a mirror reflecting your frequency back with perfect precision. Every breath you take is an instruction. Every act of clarity a command line written in light. When you move, the field adjusts. When you rest, the world exhales with you. Here's the quiet truth. The mystics have always known power that demands is brittle, but power that listens is eternal. You've learned to listen to the breath, to the pulse, to the soft click of reality aligning beneath your feet. That listening is your authority. It's the posture of coherence embodied as grace. So take this moment, this breath, as ceremony. Let the shoulders drop, the jaw unclench, the attention widen. Feel how the body recognizes completion not as an ending, but as a stable frequency. You've tuned yourself into resonance with the architecture of creation itself. And as you step back into the rhythm of your days, into screens, conversations, streets, remember coherence travels. Every calm heartbeat you carry is a signal the world can borrow. You are the quiet algorithm rewriting the code of chaos into order. The field doesn't need your noise, it needs your steadiness. It doesn't require your certainty, only your presence. So breathe once more, slow, deliberate, sovereign. Let that breath be your signature. Because when your quantum frequency matches your intention, the universe doesn't resist you. It harmonizes with you. And in that harmony, creation listens for your next word.